Good morning, just on time delivery, just on
Yes,
time, please.
exactly.
We're about to start. Excellent. Very good, very good. Just like it, credit for being.
Just the photos.
Sure, with the opening of the digital logbook session, workshop. Both ways. And maybe at the end we can take a picture with all the speakers, but we'll see how we do on time. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the digital logbook workshop. It has a very noble intent, and that noble intent is to get you together. People working in the digital logbook space. And we call the workshop Developing Useful Digital Building Logbooks for Market Uptake. Why? Because I see this workshop as a tool. I actually want to sell these things and bring value to real estate stakeholders. We see that there's something we can unlock, and we want to know how to go about doing that. So we're very interested in what's happening in the space. So this is our agenda. We lost a speaker. Paris has an obligation to the commission that popped up, and it's fine. And he's done a very good job looking at logbooks and how they can facilitate standards in the space, good morning, of energy performance certificates and the smart readiness indicator. So either as a storage repository, I've done an assessment, make sure I can get to it in my digital logbook, or as a pull, I have data and that can help me make my assessment better. So in two directions. We have two of the three projects on the call dedicated to digital logbooks. Then we have some presentations from other projects that touch digital logbooks. Many have been put in the calls on EPC and SRI. One from a project that's closed called BIM for EEB. We'll have a software developer perspective. So we have Ruben in the room. He works on software, and I told him to complain to everyone that's making specifications. Just come on the stage and be angry for 15 minutes. And then we'll talk if we still have time. So R2M in digital building logbooks, we're involved in, have the good fortune to be involved in several projects, doing several activities. And how we connect the dots and bring it to the market is still a question mark. And still the definition or what people are thinking when they say digital building logbook, we're all still working on that as a community. And it's not clear if the full solution will, it's done and it goes to market, or if we start bringing pieces. There's a functionality that someone needs. We can bring value around that functionality and then build out from that. So there was a digital building logbook tender that was organized by R2 or coordinated by R2 in France 2 or 3 years ago. That's closed. Now we have projects that are touching the digital building logbook, closed and ongoing. And there's this nice call topic that many people submitted to. And we have 2 of the 3 projects in this room. We don't have open DBL. So open DBL is coordinated by Chetna, and we don't have them. They couldn't make it. Maybe next time. And then we have a DBL tender that is open. It's currently going on. And eCourse, they were in their webinar number 4 yesterday. They couldn't come because they were actually delivering the results of their survey, which came out just a few weeks ago. So the work going in this tender, I think we should all be paying attention to, because when you work for the commission, it's a little bit different than, in a tender directly, it's a little bit different than the European project, which spans 3 or 4 years, and you get checked once every 18 months. The tender, they're on you. So I think the work that's happening in this tender is probably high quality, and the people behind it are very good. So if you're not aware, they asked all of us, or many of us in the community, to participate in a survey. And that survey has been released, the results of that. And no survey is ever perfect because you have to design it. Yeah, I started it, but in about a half an hour, I quit. My attention span was too slow. So it was a long survey. It took 45 minutes to an hour to fill that thing out. So this is one of the things I noticed. And yesterday they did this nice webinar. We couldn't attend it because we're here, or many of us probably didn't attend it, on the use cases, benefit, and data management. And I'm very interested in their use cases, because use cases sounds like something I can sell. So I'm very interested in that. I took a look. And also in June, they released this deliverable to the commission on DBL use cases. So I think that's interesting. So if you're not aware of this literature, I think it's available probably on the tender homepage. Michael sent it to us for this session because he wanted us to have access. And they opened their webinar yesterday with a refresher, and I found that relevant. You know, what are they trying to do with this tender? Development of an EU model for digital building logbooks, common EU framework, harmonization, improved data sharing, supporting stakeholders. And the main output is an EU semantic data model for DBLs. So I think that affects all of us. If the EU comes out and says the semantic model is like this, then probably many of us have to get behind that. So, and also on the concept, I think a lot of people are still, you know, what is a digital building logbook? And people can see this in a different way. So they also started their webinar yesterday with a reminder to everyone, hey, DBL or BIM is not BIM or a building material passport. So building data entrance point is the digital building logbook. It is the single point of entry for all your stuff that goes in there. So I kind of think of it like the participant portal in the EU. I go there and there's all my stuff from a long time and I can navigate, and maybe in that portal, there's some clever things that can happen that are useful for me. What's my success rate over the last 6 years? I have no idea, but probably there's an algorithm that can figure that out. And maybe you could sell it. From their survey, they said, hey, where did we observe the most agreement? So a lot of the questions were, do you agree on this or that? What is most important, this or that? And they started their web, this was maybe slide 45 yesterday on, here are the things that we agree the most about. The INSPIRE principle. Does anyone know what the INSPIRE principle is? I had the same question. So I read it one time, but I can't repeat it. But I think it has something with, you have the right to decide what goes in your logbook. Or you know, if I'm a real estate stakeholder, I can stick in the stuff I want. If I'm a public building, I can stick in the stuff I want. And then someone has to say what are the minimum viable product, but I still have the freedom to add to it if I'm a developer. If I understood. Full mode of data extraction. I don't know what the 3-branch setup is either. The data should only be provided at moments of change. That sounds like a good idea. Granting access to public data to all civilians. I don't know what the public data part is. So there's some interesting remarks here which inspire me to read the report more. I can't report on it because I just saw it this morning. In the deliverable 2.4 that they published, DBL tender use cases study, I like this. So they define some user groups. These are the people that probably are most interested in the digital building logbook. And then they mapped data to these. And before this, there's a table of what is the data set of A, B, C, D, and E. So that's defined. And then for each of those, they said, hey, if I'm a financial institution, I'm interested in data sets A, B, I, and J. And there wasn't enough room on the slide to copy because it was 2 pages of what those data sets are, but just to give you the impression that they've done some work on that. And I only have one of the conclusions for one of the user groups. But at the back of the report, there are a bunch of nice conclusions on these use cases. So what are the market drivers and who would be using these? So I found that interesting. But what's my point? So my point is we have 2 tenders now. We have 3 projects dedicated to digital building logbooks, and we have a bunch of other satellite projects that touch them. It's a nice opportunity to come together. So this tender is closing in September. They have their final webinar, and Michael invited us, because he understands we're clustering today, said, hey, if the DBL projects, so if Build Chain and Demo Blog and Build Chain want to present at the final webinar in September, we're invited. I talked to Ed Loskos yesterday. In April, there's the Building Digital Twin International Congress. I forget where he told me it is. I forget. But it's happening, and he said, hey, we should have the April 24th. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Spain.
Spain?
I think you said Spain.
Yep. So next April, there's the opportunity to cluster there. He would love to have us in any shape or form if we want to keep coming together. And then, of course, I have to put in bold Sustainable Places 2024, where then it would be really nice to get, once again, demo blog, build chain, and then this time we get an open DBL. And who knows if there are other projects at that time on the Building Digital Logbook. But at that point, we'll start to have some results, and it'd be really nice to hear about how are people tackling the challenges and what's happening in the space. So with that, good morning, welcome, and I invite to the stage the Demo B-Log project to share the ideas and the state of the progress of that project. And I did get your new 2 slides.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, good morning, all of you. It's going to be a dual presentation. My name is Henk Visser. I'm a professor in Housing Quality Process Innovation, Delft University of Technology. My colleague Sona has a PhD. She did most of the research. She will do most of the presentation. I'm going to give an introduction of this project. So one of the 3 that started at the beginning of this year. R2M is part of it. So we're very connected. For us, this project is partly new, so we were not working on digital logbooks before, but when you look to the content of our project, I think it touches on a lot of things that we are working on. And for us, it's mainly the goal of the decarbonization of the existing building stock and find tools and data and policies that can have a driving force for that. And I think this project, in our view, has all of this. So I'm going to give you a short introduction of how our project is set up and the partners and the goals, etc. Then Suna will give a presentation of the first part that we carried out, the state of play report in the first few months. I can click on. So we in our project, it's about the demonstration and the development of some existing types of digital building logbooks. These tools exist already for several years with a certain purpose. In the project, we want to find out how it actually works, which are the stakeholders, what is the data, what is the actual functionality, and how does it work out well, but also with the ideas to make further steps in the development of this. And it's not all in one defined structure and module. They all have their different characteristics, and we want to learn from it. So when we're talking about EU development, that there will be digital logbooks somehow centrally, maybe partly mandatory things, then within all these tools that we explore, I think we can find very good examples of how it can work. So we have 5 digital logbooks, and in these existing logbooks, there are, or in these tools, there are already, oh yeah, you can do okay, so maybe this is a good overview. In 5 countries, it's in Belgium, Flanders, there's the voting pass, has already quite some users. Sirdax, it's in the Netherlands, it's very small, that's more on the material use. Clea in France, CAPSA in Germany, and in the UK now also Chimney is involved. So that took a while before we knew exactly what would be the UK part. Next slide. So here is an overview. When you look through these different functionalities and data, how we can come to characterizations. I'm not going too much in detail. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Because this one shows a little bit more of the different functionalities. So the Sirdax is maybe the most complex one. That's mainly on the material use. If you have the inside in material, you can make the full cycle development overview very good. But in the more simple one is the home analytics of Clea. That's mainly giving homeowners information about decarbonization strategy. Then the next one is CAPSA. That's more on portfolio management, maybe. Voting Pass started with individual homeowners advice, but want to also make a step to a broader scope. So there's difference in complexity. Also, the level of digitalization, of course, becomes more complex. Yeah. And well, there's an overview of all the partners, 14 parties involved. We as TU Delft, we don't have any relationship to one of these actual building logbooks. We're the coordinator, we're the researchers. We want to look through all of this, and we're going to evaluate all the functionalities, etc. So I think, yeah, can we give it over to you? Oh, the objectives.
But we've already covered most of it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have many slides, so we don't.
Yeah.
And you will get all the slides and can read it later. You want to do the?
Yeah, I can do it. Yeah. Okay, so today I'd like to present to all of you here on our first content-based deliverable, which is the writing of the State of Play report set to be published end of this month. This report is aimed to communicate several key takeaways that are necessary for the development of a common EU DBL framework and for the demonstration tasks in the later phase of the study. It builds on the state of play analysis of selected best practices and stakeholder input and outlines the potential role and scope of the tool, including the central focuses as well as data handling and governance issues. Main sources of information include existing literature, consultations with over 30 DBL experts, and about 20 key stakeholders from the active regions that we're studying, through focus group sessions and also personal contact, as well as extra quantitative input that we've gathered through an online questionnaire from 65 respondents. I'll first go over the findings that we've received from the survey questionnaire that looked at the overall DBL market in the EU. We'll only go over the points that were particularly interesting in this session today. It is still a common understanding among the respondents that DBLs are still perceived as more valuable as a repository of administrative and construction information, as well as those on operational maintenance and use. For instance, information on the equipment included in the homes with the relevant user manuals are ranked as most important as 83%, while the importance of data on energy consumption can be better improved than the current 60%. What's ironic here is that the importance of having additional functionalities relating to visualizing future energy and cost-saving potentials, as well as life cycle costing, and the functionality to enable integration with smart energy services are both moderate at 36% and 41% respectively. There's an opportunity for all of us here as DBL experts to really investigate how we can use the DBL to encourage energy renovation and push the urgency in homeowners. Another interesting finding observed here is that there is a larger value placed on third-party access to data than, for instance, the more advanced functionalities such as surrounding smart energy services and SRIs. Third parties raised here include buyers, architects, notaries, property lawyers, housing advisors, service providers, etc., proving that there is a growing understanding that stakeholders from across the entire construction chain should be orbiting around the DBL for the benefit of greater overall sectoral transparency, value chain integration and communication, innovation, and circularity. The survey also revealed another important perspective. While stakeholders can benefit as users of the tool and the data itself, they can simultaneously play the role as data providers. The following two slides explore the roles of 7 stakeholder groups as potential sources of data of the 11 data fields that were previously introduced. While the level of responsibilities across the data fields may differ per stakeholder group, building owners, public authorities, building experts, financial institutions, and both public and private registers are perceived as equally active potential data providers for the efficient collection and regular revisions of building data. It's also noteworthy to highlight the capacity of EPC databases as data sources, suggesting that EPC bodies could have a much more active and dynamic role as a key stakeholder. On the roles of the EC in establishing a common framework, suggestions from the respondents can be largely categorized into three focuses. Firstly, the EC should recognize the DBL as a medium to reduce information asymmetry and as an enabler for process innovation in the built environment. The EC could correspondingly require the mandatory use of DBLs with a list of minimum requirements and establish a European register that could verify the unicity of the various DBL initiatives across the EU. Above all, it is crucial that the EC leads by example. So all EU, so this was a suggestion that all buildings that are owned by the EC should have a DBL to encourage and promote, usage and promote the concept and buy-in as well. The second directs the EC to the advancement of the growing DBL market. The market actively calls for more and more competitive DBL providers with a variety of features and functionalities across different kinds of building stock. There is an opportunity for EC here to set standards and rules to ensure the quality and validity of the data provided by these providers. The last point establishes a consensus that there should be flexibility in the way the EC should approach the mandatory implementation of a DBL. The EC should recognize that every member state is unique and has different processes and regulations, and forcing one common single model is really undesirable. Focus should therefore be placed on providing protocols, guidelines, minimum standards, and quality control, rather than centralizing the operations of the tool itself. With the information we've collected from the market survey, we subsequently designed a research framework to study the 5 DBLs that our project explores. Today, I'll focus more on the methodology that we've designed and adopted rather than the findings itself. Our report focused primarily on the mapping of key stakeholders and key functionalities. The first step to stakeholder mapping is essentially to identify all the key stakeholders that are engaged in the 5 DBLs, which we did through both desk and qualitative research. As you can also see on the screen, that the list of key stakeholders is extensive. So we designed a template to map them out with the stakeholders themselves to really understand the different levels of engagement. The categorization of these stakeholders is largely two-part. One is to distinguish the role of the stakeholder as a data user and or provider. And the second part was to identify the phases in which these stakeholders are, the phases in the building life cycle in which these stakeholders are engaged. We brought the template to a series of focus group sessions with stakeholders in the 4 regions that we're studying and invited them to build the map together. What you see on the screen is the combined findings of all the 4 sessions that were later validated by the demo blog experts in yet another focus group session. There's too much information on the screen for today, so we'll zoom into an example. From studying the operations of the 5 DBLs, we've identified 2 stages in the pre-use phase of the building life cycle, which are the planning and design brief stage and the design stage. We then looked at the various stakeholders that were engaged to these DBLs that fall under the data user category. Conclusions drawn from this stakeholder mapping exercise during validation largely orbit around a common observation. There is too little overlap between the tools than was hypothesized. A number of causes were identified here. One was the inconsistencies in the representation of stakeholder groups in the preceding focus group sessions. Number 2 was the inclusion of personal aspirations rather than reflecting on exactly how the DBLs are used at volume. And number 3 was the gaps in terminology due to differences in languages and processes. So all future studies should really aim to tackle these as well. The mapping of key functionalities also started off in the same direction. We first identified all the functionalities and data fields employed in the 5 DBLs. The raw list was then sculpted into what you can see over there, with the terms and scope generalized to encompass the various minor differences into one universal set. A data template was then created in collaboration with the DBL owning and managing partners to evaluate where the 5 DBLs overlapped and how they differed in terms of operational nature. Preliminary analysis identified 2 categorizations of the functionalities. One of which is information storage, and the other on data usage and links to other tools. The first one indicates the functionalities of the DBL that work towards building its role as a valuable repository, whereas the second one identifies the roles of a DBL as a proactive data processor, as well as an intermediary that enables integration with external tools such as public databases. With the information gathered from desk research and analysis, a mapping matrix was created to then compare the results with how the functionalities were actually perceived by the key stakeholders and users in practice. Just like the previous exercise, this is the combined findings of all the 4 sessions that were also validated with demo block experts in the next stage. The mapping is largely 2-part, the distinguishing of functionalities into the 2 categories that were first introduced. And we also included the evaluation of the value of the output, as well as the effort needed to collect the relevant data. The latter really aimed to simultaneously assess how the key stakeholders perceive the value of the functionalities within the context of using the tool and evaluate the complexities in data collection. Yeah, almost done. What you see on the screen now is the consolidated findings of both the desk analysis and qualitative sessions. A good conclusion to draw here is the different initiatives approach the functionalities differently, and understanding the overlaps and gaps between the tools is really important to evaluate the overall capacity of DBLs when assessing future potentials. The report also revealed specific benefits and prerequisites to the 5 DBLs. It's a lot of words, but we have a 3-sentence summary here. Understanding the user experience is decisive. While the tools should be further advanced IT-wise, Ensuring that the tools are usable for all user profiles is key, and it's still a challenge. In terms of the tool itself, features that should be given immediate care are digital interface, interoperability, data syncing and matching, the storage of data and information, and user-friendly navigation and visualization. Some learning points for future qualitative studies are also included in the slides that you can explore in the later time. We look forward to hearing the other presentations as well. Thank you.
We'll hold questions to the end just so we make sure that all the speakers get a chance. And congratulations on the study. While it's fresh in your mind, it would be interesting to do a map against that EU tender to see what differences you may have found that they didn't or they did and you did not. And then tell them about that so that we have those things identified. Next, we'll call up the Build Chain project with Jairus from RENA.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for introducing me. My name is Heidi. I'm going to present to you the Build Chain project, aims and ambitions. But before we start, I would like to give you a little bit of an overview of what is a logbook. I'm looking forward for your presentation, actually, Ruben. So the digital building logbook has become increasingly popular in Europe due to the availability to improve building management, efficiency, and sustainability. Of course, there are some data restrictions in each country in Europe, so we need to do some research about it before we can implement it. Then, this is just a small definition of what is a digital building logbook. So, it is a dynamic tool that allows variety of data, information, and documents to be recorded, accessed, enriched, organized, and under a specific category. It represents record of major events and changes over a building life cycle, such as the ownership, tenders, use, maintenance, refurbishment, and other interventions. And it also includes documents such as a plan, description, land, buildings, technical system, and others. Now, how do we create a digital building logbook? So in order to create a digital building logbook, we need to understand the owners, the building owners, the operators, and all the stakeholders in the building. Then, how do we implement it? So it can be created to monitor building performance, maintenance work, user disturbance. It depends on what the digital building logbook, all the stakeholders they want to achieve. Then, how is this DBL transforming our industry, the construction industry? It is because it reduces the paperwork. If you have everything in one place that you could be able to access, it makes it easy for all stakeholders and users to have it available. Of course, it also allows real monitoring of the building performance and enhance the building operations. And if there is any issues, we can also know it in advance. Okay. As I mentioned, there are some data restrictions in each country in Europe. So before we implement it, we need to know this. And most important is who can access this data. As you said in the presentation, it is important to give access to users depending on what they need to see. A final user, which is the one in the building, doesn't need to have the same access as a governance or somebody in the authorities. Now, here you can see different countries and different data restrictions. For example, how they implement a digital building logbook. So in Ireland, we have that the architects prepare a safety file and record information outlining the health and safety risks of the building. Then you have Germany and Sweden that they are offering building owners the possibility to store all building-related information in a digital repository. And we have Sweden, that is common to log all the products and materials used during construction and renovation works. Then you have Portugal and Belgium that are embedding the energy performance certificate And yes, exactly. And then we have United Kingdom. And this is important because they summarize information about the new or refurbished buildings. So you have these 5 countries and even more that they have different things that you can implement in a digital building logbook. So it will be ideal to have them all together. But of course, there are some restrictions. So now we come with the Building project. And it started on January 1st, 2023, and it's going to end in December 31st, 2024, if I'm not mistaken. And it stands for Building Knowledge Book in the Blockchain and Distributed Layer. And as we all know, there are some problems in our industry, which is that building stocks, they consume over 40% of the energy consumption in the European Union. And there is a need to make this built environment more resilient, more sustainable, and healthier. Of course, before we do this, we need a hypothesis. So, efficiency, transparent, and trust data exchange, it needs to be equal to sustainability, resilience, and energy performance. We do have some obstacles and challenges. For instance, replicating buildings related process during the life cycle. So, of course, during the life cycle of a building, there are different companies, different stakeholders that they take a part in this. So, gathering all this information, it could be an obstacle. Then we have also a lack of coordination, lack of trustworthy, and to exchange the data among building sectors. We have a lack of standardization, so difficult to compare, let's say, a building standard from the UK and Italy. They are two different things. I study in the UK, and I can tell you that they are totally different from the ones in Italy. So trying to combine these things is also difficult. Then we have data security, often sensible information. Then we also have lack of incentive. So if you don't have incentive, of course, companies and countries, they are not going to try to share this data because also data restriction. Then we have the objective of building. Let's start with the first one, which is to create a quality data ecosystem management system using the blockchain technology. For me, one of the important ones is this second one on this side, which is to improve the safety and health of comfort of building occupants. Because sometimes we don't just focus on the building and we forget about the end user, and it has to, the end user has to have a role in this as well. Then we, of course, need to improve the energy efficient, cost efficient, and of the building, and the improve of the management of large building stocks. We have to ensure the trustworthy and transparency and traceability of the logbook data so that it doesn't get leaked to somebody else that it doesn't need to. And then finally, create a new tokenized economy around digital building logbooks. So how do we implement this? On the graph, you can see that first we need the users, which are important, and each user needs to be identified. We have here maintenance, the end user, organizer, public administrators, maintenance and operator, but we also need the life cycle of a building. If it is a refurbishment, we will need, of course, the history of the building, the interventions, and the central, so all of the life cycle of the building. But it's different when it's a new building, because when you are demolishing and then building a new building, then you start from zero. But that's not true, because there was something in there. So we also need to know the data from that, from the land as well. And it's good to have it in one place, because let's say that you are constructing, you want to know what is underneath. It would be great to have this in one place. And okay, perfect. And then we pass through the core idea. So on the picture, you can see that Building will extend a digital building logbook used by the municipal of Florence. For the management and administration of this huge data building set that they have, which they are going to create a decentralized knowledge graph. You can see it on the right side. So this is kind of I would say like every game. So you have a building, let's say this building, which is a university. This building could be used, could be categorized as education. Then you have, okay, education, okay, is it still a university? Education, a university. Then to identify this building, you would have to say architecture, because I think this is the building of architecture. So you are identifying until you find, let's say, the building, then you go categorize, you have the materials, you have the structural, architecture, the MEP, and all of these could be the link to find the final. So if I wanted to find the materials of the walls, I would have to pass through all of these to find this at the end. Here we have our pilots and the use cases. So I'm going to read on that side, which are the use cases, and then you can find them with the colors. In red, you have the LSC, carbon and footprint computation, in red. Then I'm just going to give you a few, because if I give all of them, exactly, I don't have a lot of time. And let's see the first pilot. Okay, the first pilot, we have yellow, which is the anomaly defect. We have the green, which is the tool for cultural heritage. Why? Because the first pilot is a proactive maintainer for cultural heritage, which is a hospital in Granada. Then we have the pilot 2. Okay, you can see the link of the colors. Let's say the green one of the new tool is an integrator of IP of building-based tools. Then you have the red one, which is management of the renovation. And why? Because it's an integrated design of a hospital in a built environment. And again, it's a hospital in Slovenia. The third pilot is management of heritage and historic buildings in Florence. Then you have the pilot 4, the improvement of earthquake resilience and carbon footprint. And the pilot 5 is a structural design. So here you can see that we have different kind of buildings. So we are able to categorize even the timber buildings to be able to create a variety of this digital building logbook. Then you have the multi-scale. I don't have too much time, but I'm going to tell you that at the top we have the environment, climate data, and monitoring. All of these, they are linked to a city. Then in the city, of course, we need the global or the general, which will be the users, the public administration. Then you create a digital building, a digital twin, okay? Then you go to the urban, to the twin scale, which of course we need, as I mentioned before, architecture, structural, and physical materials, and any kind of engineering related to this building. Then we move to our project structure. So we have 6 work packages. The first one is project management and coordinator. We have the second one, which is the logbook. This is where everything starts and to take place. And then we have work package 3, which is the logbook implementation. Work package 4, technological application of DBL. Work package 5, build environment and ecosystem, and the work package 6, which is dissemination and exploitation. Now, this is the final slide, so we have the expected impacts. As I said, it is important to, when we create a digital building logbook, to go from the economical to the also society side. So economical is to increase productivity, innovation, capacity, and resilience, sustainability, and global competitiveness. We also need the society part, which is to accelerate twin green technology, but also think about your final user, the comfort that he's going to have. And for example, if there is a renovation, if there is a way that this user can know in advance if a utility is going to be got, it's going to be good for him because he can find other solutions instead of finding himself just one day, okay, my light is got. It's good that we can know in advance. And then we have finally the scientific one, which is the increment of innovation capacity through follow procedures. Thank you. I hope I did it in the right time. Okay.
So compliments to the Build Chain project. In the response to that call topic, digital building logbook, I think many people focused on the building and what should be in this logbook. I understand now you did an urban management tool. You went beyond what, and this is, if I have one mouse on the stage and then I have 10, it's mice. If I have a goose and I have 10, it's geese. So what do we call a cluster of logbooks into an environment that holds 100 logbooks? What's the terminology for that? Has anyone heard? So it's the first time I engage mentally with that concept. So again, a very elegant response to that call topic. Congratulations. So I think we're going to call it Chronicle. And very shortly, in 5 minutes, Georgia, if you can take us through, Chronicle does other things, but within Chronicle, it's a project that touches the digital building logbook. So we'll see how Chronicle addresses it.
So good morning, I'm Giorgia Spigliantini, and I'm going to present Chronicle very briefly today. So as Thomas said, this project is not like completely targeted on digital building logbooks, but I would say that digital building logbook is kind of transversal, and the project is more focused on the services that you can extract from there. Okay, the project started in July last year, so we are quite at the beginning. It's a 6 million project, and it's about the use of this data and dynamic logbooks for value-driven services. So, as I said, the objective here is to focus on the services that you can extract from the use of this data for different purposes. So energy performance assessment in a dynamic way, and indicators focus on the human side, like comfort and health, social aspects, and APCs, dynamic APCs. And what I like about this project is that it's very, very focused on use cases, business scenarios. So to understand the kind of services that we can provide, but who's going to use them, for what, and who's going to buy these services. So one of the questions, I think, one of the most controversial questions, is not really about who's going to buy the digital building logbook, but who's going to buy the services out of it, probably. So this is very, very brief, as I said, because the digital building logbook in this project is tackled by R2M. So I think that we will hear more in just a couple of minutes. But so first of all, there are questions being discussed in these very days about the users, the end users of this digital building logbook. I am personally involved in the use case definition and business scenarios definition, and I've heard many discussions about the people which are not, let's say, in agreement about the kind of use, who's going to buy them, who's going to use them for what, etc., etc. So it's probably important to get this discussion ongoing because there is still a lot to be answered, the requirements and the needs. So here, the digital building logbook is being based. So again, this is interesting. It's interesting for, of course, for the community of engineers and designers. It has some questions to be answered about the final users, building owners or tenants, why they should need a link with BIM, for example, and the evaluation methods. So yeah, we have this digital twin. Again, this is quite, let's say, heavy in terms of the data for an input to build the digital twin, to be updated and to extract knowledge out of it. So I would say this is a demanding service to be provided, and probably efforts are needed to understand also, let's say, how to target different types, different levels of services based on the actual needs of the final users. So we have 5 demonstrators, and I'm just showing them to see where this kind of knowledge is being applied. These are residential multifamily buildings. And basically, all these demo sites provided the availability to register a lot of data, a lot of monitoring. And the Chronicle project is trying to provide services out of it. So that's it. But I think that you will hear more in a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Drew. Good 1 minute fast. And we're doing fine on time because we lost the speaker. So next we have a guest presentation. So Ricardo and Andrea of one team joined in. When they came to the event, they said, you know, we have a digital building logbook. We've been in some projects. I said, wow, a real digital Building Logbook, please come to our workshop and tell us about that. Show us what that's about. Software DBL workshop. You put on the key.
Yes, aggregate.
Devices. This one?
Actually, no.
It's not
It was a different device. This down. Maybe this one.
Yeah, one. This is the workshop.
You know what? When I didn't saw any
Interface. Totally not be. Okay. So you know what we do? On the desktop, we'll just switch to other presentations and put it on.
You want to take my laptop?
I'm afraid, no, I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do, this is the key.
So we can try again on the key.
Yeah. I'm looking for the desktop. That's fine. We have the presentations on the desktop here. You can try and put that
Yes,
on. And Ruben, instead, why don't we go with the software developer perspective instead? When we get that presentation.
Thomas,
Sure.
I see the same thing. I mean, isn't this one the did? There is already the presentation, but I only see like this.
No, it's not that.
Maybe it's not this.
No,
It's
it's that one. Yeah, just put it on there now. We'll do this presentation. We'll come back to you. Yeah, just put it right now. No, we just need to put his presentation on the key and then I'll bring it back up. But we'll switch the order of the presentation
Okay.
and then that way we do it. Yeah. Just go into the presentation mode. So we'll just switch the order. So Ruben is a software developer, and the most important thing always the software developer will tell you is give me the specifications and stop changing them. Because when I build something a certain way, it's hard to read. And I'm an engineer. So Ruben, please.
So, hello, good morning. Well, before starting speaking about the engineering perspective to the DBLs, I would like to present the area in R2N in which we are working on DBLs and in construction in general. The area is called Digital and Sustainable Transition in Buildings, and the objective we have is to have a digital and green transition for a more sustainable environment and society. We focus in different things related to buildings, digitalizations, end users, and covering topics like energy efficient buildings, digital twin, scan to BIM, data management, and also capacity building programs. So, speaking about the DBLs, one day our innovation director came saying that we're going to start thinking, researching, and eventually developing a DBL. So my first reaction was, what is a DBL? I didn't know nothing about DBLs. So I got the explanation, the initial explanation, the initial ideas about a DBL, and I thought, nobody will use it. This is something already existing. So I recall this comic, this strip, in which it mentions what normally the engineers and the developers say and what it means. So I was in these two words. This doesn't do anything new. Why would anyone want something like that? And the meaning or the result is, well, this product is probably going to be a gigantic success. So Well, what is a logbook? I got the initial explanation about the logbooks, and I thought, okay, logbooks exist in different other sectors. They are quite common in nautical environment. If you do scuba diving, you have a logbook. If you work in transport, you have a logbook. Basically, all have in common that are a record of important events or a record of important documents. Basically, a record of records. This is the summary. Also, is the definition that is included in Wikipedia at this day. So basically, a record used to record states, events, and conditions applicable to different kind of machines and personnel. So once I knew what was a logbook, I thought, okay, and then what is a digital building logbook? In engineering, there is let's say, a methodology for solving problems that is divide and conquer. Is based on dividing a complex problem in small, more simpler problems in order to solve them and then eventually solve everything. So I did this one. So what is a log? I know what is a logbook, I know what is building, and I know what is digital. So logbook, a trusted and shared repository of events, records, and states. Building is a reconstruction, permits, models, BIM, and digital, it means web-based, scalable, accessible. So a basic definition, so I came to this basic definition, which is in line with the previous one, that is a common cloud-based repository of building relevant data. And discover all the life cycle of the building. And this is more or less in line with what is described in the first, in the definition that the European Commission published a few years ago, related to the first tender related to digital building logbook. So a common repository for all relevant building data, with an emphasis on sharing. What happens is that after reading and researching a little bit about digital building logbooks, for me it's not fully clear that this is a definition that is accepted in all the cases. Also, I see more and more requests for calculating things, for estimating things, for rating things. So it's not about only storing data and not about sharing. It's about also doing something with the data. And then there are a lot of requests, a lot of, let's say, information about doing benchmarking and comparison between buildings. So again, it means that probably it's not only a repository. There has to be some added value services around the DBL. Another of the questions from my perspective is, how is this different from other solutions that are already in the ecosystem, the construction ecosystem? We have construction management software. In the construction management software, they do monitoring, they store files. We have digital twins. The digital twins also have representation of data. They have eventually some information there. They can update data in real time. You have common data environments. It's a collaborative platform in which you can store some files. You have asset management. You have portfolio management. So most of them are solutions that are not far from a DBL. So, and there is a quite huge overlap in some of these solutions. So still not sure how different it is from all of them. Also, I checked if there was any good example of a DBL. I saw quite different things, from people calling a DBL just a repository in Dropbox. We upload documents there and we have a DBL. Solutions in the construction sector, like one CMS that can be converted to a DBL with no effort. It's just a matter of changing a few things or just making some marketing around it. Digital things that can be extended in order to include a document repository and convert it to a DBL. or even some application for social networks or community that they have a document repository in which they can, aggregate all the data. So what is the best approach also? It was another of the question. Develop a DBL from scratch, start from nothing, or integrate with already existing solution. Or focus in the DBL, so in the main core mechanism of the DBL, or it's better to work in the added value service, like calculation, simulation, data representation. These are some of the questions we are discussing still about. These are the main functionalities that were described in the public report of the first tender of the, related to digital building logbooks in the European Commission. There are functionalities like, of course, bin representation, but there are also functionalities like life cycle cost, which is a kind of a calculation. There are linked to renovation roadmap. So there are a few things, and there is not a big consensus and not all the DBLs cover all of these functionalities, but most of them cover just a few of them. So probably with this second tender and with the projects, these functionalities will be more clarified more. Also, I saw you with your survey, I think that it's a little bit more clarified. Regarding data sources and types, what is relevant data? We are mentioning storing relevant data, EPC, renovation passports, model, permits, pictures, quotes, documents. And what about data that we don't know yet? Because the idea is not to have a DBL only for past information. In 2 years, we can have new different kinds of data. So we need to develop something that is more or less compatible with the current data, but also that is compatible with data that will be generated in the future. Also, we saw a lack of homogeneity. So there is not a consensus about what data should be in the DBL. And even how to represent the data that is collected. About users and stakeholders, in the report of the tender, 3 main users are mentioned: the building owners and occupants, it's a two, financial institutions and public authorities. But then, if you check the document and if you check the interviews and if you check the surveys, these all stakeholders were taken into account. So we are considering, plenty of stakeholders are involved in a DBL. Also, there is we saw that there are DBLs in different countries for different functionalities. At some point, will all they be integrated? There will be a meta DBL that is going to, let's say, cover and aggregate data from all the DBLs. Do we need this kind of let's say, federated systems of DBLs? Could be interesting in order to aggregate data. This is one thing that probably will come in the future. Also, DBLs from different stakeholders can have different needs, different requirements. And again, is the DBL just a repository of the relevant data, or is just an excuse to do ratings, benchmarking, and calculation? So this is more or less the question we had, and this is the approach we are following in Chronicle and internally. That we are still discussing, but this is more or less the line that we are trying to follow, at least related to the DBLs. The problem, I think that you all mentioned before, there is plenty of data, scattered data. We need to aggregate it and have in a, let's say, in a same repository. What this means? So this means having a platform that supports information management, that supports search, filtering, visualization, that has a good user interface, because probably the users are not so much used to this kind of applications. So it has to be cloud-based. We need to avoid complexity. We need a strong user and role management system. Some part of the data will be shared, other no. You need to control what you could share. what can be used for other purposes, what can be used for calculations. Integration and interoperability is one of the key topics. So you need to facilitate the data exchange and also have some notification and alerting in order to inform the user and keep the user involved about the activities happening in the DBL. There are a lot of issues related to security, to privacy, to integrity. In Chronicle, we are addressing it also by using the blockchains for integrity, for traceability. There are issues related to multi-tenancy of cloud platforms, issues related to authentication. In case of a federated DBL, you need also a kind of federated authentication mechanism. Also, what happens with privacy, using privacy by default or privacy by design approaches. So also the idea of separate functionality, separate what is the user interface from the gene, from the data. So this is the ideas about security and privacy. Also related to integration. So developing a DBL that integrates everything is not realistic. I mean, there is new data every day, there are new sources. So the approach maybe is the other way around. We develop a DBL that is a reliable repository of data, and externals, any third party, can use our APIs in order to store the data that is considered relevant. This simplifies a little bit the idea of the DBL, and well, let's say makes it less complex and more focused in one specific task. So it's what in computing we call a SIM, so a destination of data flows. So the idea could be, okay, instead of having a DBL that does calculation, writing everything, why not create connectors of added value? So we have the DBL, which is focused on the functionality of having the logbook, and then we provide the integration mechanism in order to allow the creation of third-party or even, compatible applications. This is an approach that multiple cloud solutions are following, and enables different capabilities and enables the possibility to scale and to adapt the DBL to future needs. And I had a few slides related to projects in which we are involved. I think that Tom presented them in the beginning of the session. So Chronicle, Smart Living PC, Smart Square, Lego Fit, and the conclusion. The conclusion is that from the perspective of a software engineer is that there is not a clear consensus of what a DBL is. There are a lot of initiatives, there are a lot of definitions, but there is not a clear consensus. There is a significant overlap between different applications in the construction. Integrating everything is not realistic, so maybe the approach of added value services and connectors is the best approach. And there is a lot of room for research in topics related to DBL. Semantics, big data, artificial intelligence, data visualization, there is plenty of possibilities. And coming back to the original comic strip, also because there is one other idea that is, I will never put any of my data in a site controlled by another company. This means that probably in a few years everybody will have to do it. So that's it from my side. So thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. I hope made me challenge some of my thinking and assumptions. I very much enjoy the different perspectives. See if we can get on the key. There we go. And at the end of this, we'll have 5 minutes before the coffee break. And in those 5 minutes, we need at least 2 or 3 good thought-provoking questions. So please have that in mind. As we do this.
Not to me.
And up to you. Yes. Very good. This is Ricardo from one team who has developed a digital building logbook.
Thank you for the opportunity. As Thomas said, we were involved basically last minute, and I think it was good to exchange the presentation because there were some question marks, and basically this was a Horizon 2020 project in which we were developing a common data environment. BIM4EB stands for BIM-based fast toolkit for efficient renovation in buildings, and to give you an overview, we worked up to TRL 6 in this project. There were 3 pilots, which were residential, social, and private buildings in Italy, Poland, and Finland. The project started in 2018 and ended in 2022. It was coordinated by Politecnico di Milano, and it has a budget of 7 million euro. Basically, we developed a solution for the renovation of buildings. This solution is a BIM-based smart toolkit, and the toolkit is used by designer for the designing and planning phases, as well as by the construction companies to undertake their work, and also for the societies that provide the renovation solution. Our role within the project, as said, was the development of a common data environment, which we call BIM management system. And in it, we have BIM models of the buildings, the relevant documents, as well as the live data coming from the field. Sorry, in this case, from the IoT infrastructure. And of course, we also have some tools developed by other partners integrated into this common data environment. The toolkit not only supports the design phase, but also the owners for the management of the asset. In this slide, you see in the center, in the middle, the BIM management system, our common data environment, and the other 6 rectangles are basically the tools that were developed by the other partners, integrated by us through API method. Some tools are used for the design phase. For example, of course, the fast mapping of the building, which is an augmented reality tool. Some others, such as the BIM for occupants, were used directly by the occupants, basically. Our main functionalities. We have an IFC BIM viewer that you are seeing on the top right of the screen. You are seeing basically the platform with the toolbar on the left and the Italian demo site building. In this specific little table, it's not very detailed, but they are basically the values of the different parameters coming from the sensors. There is no graphic. It was considered that this CDE was completely open source and developed from scratch. But as one team, we also developed using as engine commercial solutions, such as, for those who followed our EcoFat presentation, for example, Autodesk Platform Services. We have the IoT data, we have the connection with the Samsung Smart Things. Different users can access this platform depending on their roles, because designers, occupants, even the public authorities can access it. The platform is ISO 19650 compliant. This means that we have the workflow status, document classification, versioning history, and also the check-in and out system. We have the resource management, and most importantly, we have the ontologies and the linked data. Basically, the BIM4EB ontologies are a vocabulary for the linked data. Linked data includes lifecycle assessment, cost, regulations, and the ontology also include IoT data, vocabulary about IoT data and GIS data. Indeed, you are seeing also very small GIS map. We used it to identify basically the position of the assets. Then we have the REST APIs, not only to connect the 6 tools that you are seeing in the top left, but also for external services, and I am referring to, for example, the Wikidata. Okay, in this BIM management system, we also have the module of the digital building logbook, which can be accessed from the toolbar on the left of our BIM management system. It is integrated into it, and we have the interfaces. Therefore, it can be accessed even by the end user. And those interfaces, you can fill in the values. Basically, what is a digital building logbook? From our perspective, is a MySQL, MySQL database, which contains 2 tables in our cases. And in this structure, we store and visualize general, administrative, construction, and operational information about the building. Of course, these tables contain fields, and in BIM4EB there were, if I remember correctly, because I was not project manager, but they are 400 fields, I think, yeah. And they have the role-based permissions depending on the user. It means that some users have some functionalities enabled and some others which are disabled. And this means that, for example, some user can edit information or visualize them, and some others cannot, basically. And this is this reason is connected with the fact that information is shared between different stakeholders, such as the companies of the construction sector, the building owners and the occupants, and also, apart from the public authorities, also institutions such as the financial institutions. The good thing is that in this project, we were basically the owner of the key exploitable result up to development was up to TRL6. In May, we started a new project, which is called Build On, and we will reach with our solution the TRL8. And you can see here the improvements that we are going to make, which are the inclusion of data exchange functionalities regarding the digital building logbook. And this will allow us to communicate, allow the communication between the logbook and the tools of the project. In that project, we will have a smart toolbox, not an integrated platform. Also, the communication with the digital twins, and even with the smart readiness indicator. The interfaces probably will be changed, will be made even more user-friendly. And we are also evaluating, the project only started in May, to probably switch to a different database, for example, SQL, which also has part of graph, not only tables, or GraphDB. After the end of the task of the requirements, we will know what solution we will use. In closing, we will also do an improvement in terms of data collection process, because we will exploit the BIM models to have the automatic feeding and update, of the tables, of the fields of the logbook. And also having a link with the external sources, for example, to the external sources that give notification about consumption or maintenance tasks and so on. And that's it. This is a small presentation, but I hope that I managed to give you at least an overview of what we have and what we will improve in this new Horizon project.
Thank you. I just noticed you're a good-looking audience. So we should have, buy the sustainable places almost, if we just wave, something for social, I don't know, from the digital logbook session, thanks. Very good, very good. So let me put we don't have a lot of time for question and answers, but maybe we can fit in some proclamations. So who has something to say, a proclamation or a burning question? I even give you 10 minutes to think about it. Don't let me down. Zia.
I'd like to give the very layman perspective, which I hold. I agree that it was a good evolution of presentations with the survey and Ruben's questions, and then finally an actual DBL. I think the whole time I was thinking, man, what is the difference between a DBL and a BIM, or all of these other tools, SRI, EPC, whatever. And I love that this thing collects all of those existing tools, the one that you're developing at one team. I mean, I think for me, that's the real value, is like, if it can communicate with all of these existing tools and really become like the portal, like you said, and really let all of the users use all of these tools in one place.
We didn't have with us today Chimney. They're out of the UK. They're a residential logbook provider, real nice company. And if you go to their homepage, you see your building stuff, your tax stuff, your public stuff, and they use the word stuff. So it's a friendly environment for people to interact with their buildings. And maybe we get them next time. Any other big sweeping thoughts? Please, Ava.
A couple of questions. One is that I read several times that we should, or that the commission should make the DBL mandatory, and I'm really puzzled because I still see DBL as a creator of different solutions and stakeholders. So for whom should be mandatory, or should we ever make mandatory the open access to certain types of data, so that whatever is the stakeholder and the DBL, this data will be accessible, like adaptive data, I don't know, other data. So I should make it mandatory the data access rather than the DBL, because children for me is for residential people, for the occupants of the buildings. Why should it be mandatory? This is one question. The second one is we're talking about a lot of data. What about the data ownership? Because this data will generate a lot of value, money, interest, profits. We have the artificial intelligence that will create even new data. Who are the owners of this data? How can we control this data generation? These are two questions.
Please, Hank.
Well, talking about your first question, like what should be mandatory, in the next EPD 4, it's already announced that there will be a requirement for innovation passports. So, and it's not maybe exactly defined how it will look like, but I think most of these tools will have that functionality. So maybe it's not that in one size, with one type of data, everything should be mandatory, but a little bit like the EPCs, it started with there should be something like an EPC, and now through the years it gets more and more similar. I think also the next version of the EPD, it will be one determination method for EPCs in all the different countries. But I think it starts with a kind of global push, and it gets more and more to the same kind of thing.
Thank you. And I noticed the recommendation that the EU Commission buildings should do it first. And for me, we created 3 big circles. Is it, policy? Is it technology providers? Or is it end user functionalities that eventually kick everything off? And we don't know the answer to that question yet. What kicks off the digital building logbook revolution, if you will? But don't miss the opportunity. So we had some banking problems a few months ago. A lot of banks failed. And Apple made Apple Bank. In 2 days, they had 350 billion euro flow into Apple Bank. So if some player makes Apple digital building logbook tomorrow, we all lost the opportunity because they did it. And it doesn't matter what they do, what it looks like. Once they've done it, everybody will say, that's what it is. And that will become the standard. So I hope that from our community, someone puts up first something that's a minimal viable product that allows people to become more comfortable with the concept, and then it iterates and gets built upon. But I think we risk talking about what we need too much instead of doing it. So this is one of our challenges. So with that, next year at Sustainable Places, we're going to come together again. We'll get more of the digital building logbook projects with us, and you have a whole year to think about questions for next year's session. And it's going to be, we'll announce it on the big stage, but since some of you may have a taxi, it's going to be in Luxembourg in September of 2024. Not fully planned, but we've got the vision now. And we'll show some pictures about that in the closing ceremony. So with that, thank you to all of our speakers. I enjoyed the workshop and enjoy the coffee break. And if I can get the speakers on the stage for a picture, then we have that captured. Ruben and Cheris. Did we lose Cheris? Yes. Georgia. Hey, you got to take the picture? Thank you. We step back a little bit. Very good, very good. And Ava, let me turn on the light too, in case I need that 1 second.
Does it also?
Oh boy, that's probably gonna be. Thank you. Great.
Thank you.
To make one about the
Of course.
yeah, maybe somebody. Yeah. You want to Eva. The chronicle team.
Yeah.
No, you. Yes. No, you are part of the. You are also part of the team.
Yeah.
Only of the chocolate.
Thank you.
I suggest you put because you want one on the right so that.
Hello, you're the next workshop. You're helping.
We are here to help. We are supposed to close the session online.
Probably a good idea. I'll step back.